Hey, everybody, welcome to this edition of the MSP Growth Kit, talking everything sales and marketing as you take your MSP and you try to build sales and sales teams and yeah, figure out how to grow instead of, well, that's exactly what we're going to talk about today, gentlemen, right? We got
Yep.
Nate Austin from Mytech with us and Steve Riat from Nex-Tech. And I'm Brad Schow with ConnectWise, and we've been talking MSP sales and growth on these videos. And today we're going to talk about target client profiles, which when if I jump right into it, I'm just going to jump right into it, right? If you talk about this, it starts with anything for a buck, right? Like when you first start your business, I love that term when I first heard it, anything for a buck, because I think it super accurately describes where most people start their journey. You're just happy to have anybody who's willing to write a check do anything for you. But as you grow, there's some counterintuitive lessons I think that we're going to talk about today through that you learned. Hopefully, we learned a lot of them through the School of Hard Knocks, but we're trying to save you guys some of the pain maybe of what it looks like to progress through some of this. But eventually what you learn is that the more targeted your client profile, that is the key to growth and scalability. It's not doing everything for everybody, but it's kind of dialing that stuff in. And you're seeing here on this slide kind of what that journey looks like and some of the lessons that we're going to talk about today that we've learned as you get there. So yeah, let me just start with this, and Nate, I'll start with you. Um, uh, what comes to first thing that comes to mind when you think of anything from a buck all the way down to a mature target client profile?
So I'm going to answer that question after I make one of the things you said, Brad, made me think of I'm a big fan of Stephen Covey, where you start with the end in mind. And what you said, to teeing this all up, like the top performing sellers, one of the things that they do and why this is so important, don't spend time on deals that they're not likely to win. And so, like, by doing this, you're enabling your sales team. That you just reminded me, because I just was watching a sales coaching thing the other day, and they mentioned that. I'm like, God, yes, that's so powerful. Is that you don't spend time on deals that you're not likely to win. And so by defining this, you're able to spend time on the deals that you are more likely to win. So anyway, but going back to your question, I was known in an organization when we first started, because me and my business partners, that was really just us, right? And I would sell the shiny object. That's so Steve and I were talking about the shiny object syndrome, and I would sell anything. And the way that impacted our team, and what the phrase that comes to mind is, I used to say all the time to our team, "You're the tech, figure it out." Like that was like our sales service tension back in the day, right? It was like I would sell something, and they'd be like, "Well, how do you expect me to do this?" I'm like, "I don't know, stay at a Holiday Inn Express or something, and then go do it the next day." But you're the tech, figure it out. And so that was kind of like, and again, sometimes that was joking, but sometimes it wasn't. It was seriously like, figure it out. So that's my recollection of that era of our business.
Yeah. Steve, how about you? What's your thought on the anything for a buck era and getting out of it?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm going to put a couple acronyms out here, Brad, because you're talking about them, and I'm very likely to say it. So anything for a buck, AFAB. Just so if you hear us say AFAB, that's anything for a buck. Just in case you've heard that in industry talks. The other one is TCP, target client profile. I'm very likely to say that, so I want to put that out there. And inside of our organization, we start using these acronyms quite a bit because it starts bringing validity to that. But yeah, look, that was definitely the journey. Me and Nate were talking about this before we got on this recording, is that I think that everybody starts here because the first word we have on there is survival, right? I need revenue. Whether it's margined or not, I have to kind of like get some stuff in the door to pay some payroll to like make the lights stay on. And so there's kind of the two opposite ends of the shiny object. Oh, that's new cool feature that I'd like to sell because I think it's cool techie. And then the opposite side of it is literally I need to like sell something this week to get the money in the door so I can make sure we get our bills paid. Those are definitely driving objects to get it done. And then to Nate's point, I was just having this conversation with a group earlier where like our best performing reps absolutely marshal their time And one of the number one ways that they're marshaling their time is ignoring deals that aren't deals. And again, I've kind of quoted Brad on this. That's not a deal. Making sure that you qualify or disqualify very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we've talked about it on this cast before, where it's like get to the know. Like hurry up and get to the know here in this stage, so you're early disqualifying. But that I kind of rambled across that. But there you
Well,
go,
Steve,
Brad.
that's also why we titled this session "Who Not to Sell To," right? Like,
Yeah.
like not identifying your target client profile or customer profile, or sometimes it's referred to as ideal customer profile or ideal client profile (ICP). I've heard it phrased both ways. We just call it TCP for the sake of this session, but it's just as important to do that, because that really identifies who not to sell to, who not to waste your time on, is really what we're trying to accomplish here. So yeah, very powerful.
You know, you remind me. I had a call with a vendor late last week, actually a week ago today, and they pitched their whole thing. I thought about it over the weekend, and I sent them an email on Monday because I told them I was going to respond. I said, you know what, it's just not a good fit. Like, thank you for pitching, and you know what, they never responded to me. So part of the lesson here is, first of all, to take those customers and say, you know what, thank you, because I've done them a favor of stop wasting their time. But the other part of that is it's not a good fit for right now. Like, maybe not permanently, but not for right now. So also don't think because you're telling a customer no today, because maybe down the line they grow into you or you grow into them or whatever, right? But don't have this mentality of like, this is a negative thing. This is not a negative thing. This is a positive thing for both of you. Because if you sell anything for a buck, you're going to deliver something really poor. If you sell a shiny object, probably the first time you've sold it, probably going to deliver very poor. So remember, you're not providing the best service, and that's what you want to do.
Well, and Steve, on that point too, I think there's oftentimes, I remember a client asking me one time, or a prospect actually asking me, he's like, well, what makes you different than some of your competitors? And I'm like, well, I'll tell you what we're not good at and what we won't do. Like, I was very overt about that, because sometimes, early on you stretch yourself, right? You're like, I think we can figure this out. But as you grow, it's, you understand there's risk with doing that, right? If you take on a client that really is going to demand more from you than you can deliver, you not only put that client at risk, but you put your own business and reputation at risk, right? And so it's really important to be careful about where you choose to stretch yourself or draw that line, especially as you grow. So I know we need to move on because we have time, but great.
Well, I think when I think through this, I think the important thing is it's such a psychological hurdle for an owner to get out of the anything for a buck mindset, because it serves them well to kind of get established many times, right? And then when the key to getting out of this like mindset and actually starting to grow is to be convinced that it's not the right way to do things. And a lot of times that's almost impossible. It seems like a lot of owners just they kind of get stuck with that. And I think of like two lessons, and I want to ask you guys a few questions that I've heard all the time about kind of this dynamic. But if you're selling services and you change that service all the time, there's no way to scale it. Like you have to constantly, so really all you're really trading is time for dollars. And that's not a recipe for making money. It's a recipe for getting established, but it's not a recipe for kind of scaling. You want to get out of that. And the other thing that I run into a lot of times is partners like, well, we'll take a massive kind of hardware deal at almost no margin because it drives like, but it's like, but you have to have an engine to procure it and inventory it, and like all of that overhead that you don't think about just leads you to the point where you're just not making exactly right. Again, it seems good until it's not. So I'm going to ask you guys three quick questions. All right, here we go. And Nate, I'll come to you first. If I start narrowing my customers and what we do, sales are going to slow down. Like what do you say to that owner where that's what his pushback is?
Yeah, that's tricky because you see the revenue, right? You're thinking like, okay, I can bring in this deal, but you're not thinking about the operational impacts, really. And I think those lessons, and as Steve and I talked about this, one of the sections that we noted is like part of the journey was you kind of end up being, and I know a lot of MSPs, including us, I think that we unintentionally found ourselves with a little bit of a focus or feeling like we're more of an expert in certain industries and not others. And that wasn't, I'd like to say that it was because you had some brilliant foreshadowing and that we knew that this is where we wanted to be, but that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
We basically just found as we evolved that we were able to get clients in certain industries, and then we got clients in other industries too, but that ended up not being a good fit for us. And for us, for example, that's like retail, restaurant, schools, like education, like none of those were good for us. I'm not saying those are bad industries. So I want to be very clear with all the people listening that these are not saying that you should do what we've done. It's just that ultimately that's what we found based on how we had been evolving was not a good fit for us.
Yeah.
And so that's really, I think the one of the first lessons, Brad, was that we learned that some of these are just like either they were low margin, because like that was one of the things we found out when we were doing like old PCI compliant stuff back in the day, just for like firewall management and in restaurants and retail. Man, we were getting pummeled by national competitors that really focused and had massive scale on that. We couldn't make any money at it, and there was huge risk. So we're like, all right, we're just taking that out, right? So that's kind of our first journey and one of the first lessons to answer your question.
All right, I got one for you, Steve. So now you got a salesperson or two, and they come back and they're like, look, we need to be opportunistic. For me to be able to sell, I got to be able to kind of sell whatever. We're selling to entrepreneurs. They're not going to necessarily buy what we want to do. Like, how do you handle that pushback or objection kind of internally as you try to build a target customer profile?
For sure, early it is absolutely a nightmare. Mainly because the problem that you're trying to do is that you're just hungry, right? And you're believing your salespeople, like, we got to be able to offer this or else we're not going to make money. We got to be able to do that, or the competitor's doing this, or we got to lower our price, right? Like that's the big one. Like the price needs to be cheaper. And the key is you have to have belief in what you've built. You can feel the passion of this group that we're talking to today. I am very passionate that this is one of the key factors of success of building your company. Like, I believe that at a core. The problem is you're not going to believe it until you've done it, and it's going to be a super painful journey to get there. So I think belief in what you're doing is true, and then showing that path to these reps to go, look, this is what we're good at, and if you can repeat selling this 2 or 3 times, then you're going to take fire. Here's my example. We have a hosted VoIP platform that we sold, and it took us forever to get this thing off the ground. But then we sold it like 5 times, and the customers loved it, and they kept adding to it. And now every month we sell a whole ton of them and continue to scale because we're good at it, because the salespeople know it, because the technicians know how to deliver it, and it works fantastic. So I think the key is be patient, believe in what you're doing, and then see the results, and it will fuel the fire.
Yeah. Well, and to answer, I think part of that, I think it's okay to be opportunistic, because sometimes, like using Steve's example, sometimes that identifying that hosted VoIP is an additional solution you might want to add to your platform. The way that might come to you is because a good client requests it, and maybe it's not part of your solution set yet. And you're like, but you know what? I think if we're organizationally intentional and purposeful about choosing to pursue this opportunity, that's okay. Right. And it might not work, but like, it's better than just saying, I'm going to sell something random and then expect my team to be able to deliver it, because that's going to create chaos in your organization. But being intentional organizationally about identifying opportunities that you might be able to scale, I think is oftentimes how it happens, how you choose to bring on different solution sets.
And towards the end, we'll talk a little bit about like, how do you kind of go about dialing some of this down. But as we were building our MSP, our opportunistic thing, and we had to learn like this lesson, but we had plenty of opportunities where we were comfortable pricing something high enough where we could learn on the customer's dime and establish that we could do it. And we made the mistake of doing that without asking, I think, the more important question, which is, what percentage of our customer base would buy this beyond the one-time person that helped you get it established? Which, in my mind, that's where the entrepreneurial, opportunistic kind of check and balance comes into play. Is not just can you do it, but if you do it, can you then sell it to most of the rest of your of your base?
But Brad, the one thing I do like about that is you're pricing it up to make what I've heard many times the opposite. Like, we don't know what we're doing, so we're going to cut the price in half. to experiment on you. It's like, oh,
Right.
like,
Yeah.
why would you double down? And then
Yeah.
to your point, the things that I like to think about when developing some of those new solutions is A, can we make money with it? B,
Yeah.
can we repeat it? And then C, what's the risk? Right? Like, what if this goes horribly wrong? Like, am I going to put somebody out of business? Am I going to put myself out of business? Like, is the
Yeah.
cybersecurity risk to it? What is the risk of the customer and me to not succeeding, and being honest about that? Because that is a new part of our industry that we have to pay attention to.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, here's the last objection that I hear, and then we'll talk about some of these lessons that we have on here. But what do you say? And Nate, I'll come back to you on this one. What do you say to the owner who says we just don't have enough customers in our market? Like we don't have a pool that lets us really dial in who we're targeting.
Oh, I don't know if I have a great answer for that, Brad, candidly, because we choose to be in markets where that's not an issue. I mean,
Yeah,
really, I mean,
right.
that we're intentional. Like part of our geographical lessons, which is one of those things, is that we choose to be in markets where we're not going to be constrained by narrowing our focus.
Right.
But I know sometimes that's not your reality, right?
Yeah.
You're in a small town or whatever.
Right.
So yeah, you might need to diversify, but I think one of the things that we've found, and this is I think where at least the approach that we've tried to take is, 80%. Again, I'm throwing out the 80-20 rule, so it's not like I have hard statistical data on this, but like we believe that 80% of our clients basically need the same stuff.
Yeah.
Right, or our clients need 80% of the same thing, and then that 20% is what might be unique by the industry they're in, the software they use, the vertical that they are part of, whatever, right? And so what we try and do, and I think this is applicable to answer your question, is like be great and be super efficient at the 80%. Right, because like if it's a firewall, is a switch, is a wireless, is a server, is a cloud, right, it's all the same
Yeah.
regardless of industry. So be really good at that from an efficiency and streamline perspective, which should afford you the time to deal with the 20% of the variable that's naturally going to exist in your client base, regardless of the software they use or the industry they're in, et cetera. So that
Yeah.
would be my answer to that, and kind of the approach that we've taken and what we've found to be true.
Yeah. Yeah. Steve, you got anything to add to that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I have the opposite community base that Nate has. He's in these, NFL cities, and I am in the opposite of an NFL city. And so, I look at, we do have a location in a town of about 250,000. The next biggest is 50,000. The town I'm in is 20,000. And I don't think that we own more than 10% of the market in any one of those markets, which drives me crazy. However, I look at the entire market and go like, if I had my TCP applied, my target customer profile applied, like maybe only 20% of those customers that are out there are good alignment for me. So I have 50% of my target customers that I really want,
Yeah.
which is still not what I'd like it to be. But I guess my question, anybody that says that they've like need to expand geography just because they've run out of opportunity, like come visit my town and let me show you what that looks like, because I don't think you have. I don't think you're close.
Yeah.
I think there's a ton of our MSP business being sold in every market. And, if you're telling me you're a $10 million business, even in a town of 20,000 people, I don't think you've hit the addressable market yet. Like
Yeah.
it's just that crazy.
Yeah. I would
There is a lot
agree.
of business out there.
We all have a good friend in Arlen Sorensen, and I mean he built his business in Harlan, Iowa, which is a town of about 5,000 people. And he when he ran into what he thought was kind of that ceiling, his approach was, well, I'm just going to go begin to do M&A in other small towns because we understand small towns, we understand small town business. So let's just leverage that, and grew. I don't know. At one point he had 7 or 8 or 9 cities kind of in heartland of the United States. And that was his answer to that question. So, okay, let's talk about, we got a few minutes left. Let's talk about some of the kind of the challenges. Nate, you talked a little bit about industry segments and kind of how you stumble into some of those things. But the other things that we've talked about are bad client lessons or geography lessons. What are a couple of your war stories that you learned from? And then we'll wrap this up by talking a little bit about how do you kind of define your target customer profile. But what are some war stories you guys have?
So So I think of two, and I'm trying to keep it short. I'll start with the geographical lesson, then I'll get to the bad client lesson, or at least a bad client lesson, because we have a lot of bad client lessons. But the geographical ones is early on, just like many of us, we grow by referral. And so we had definitely got some good clients, good relationships, and they had referred us into other businesses. And so we had clients that, here we are based in the Twin Cities, and we have office in Denver. But this was before we had the office in Denver. We had clients that had offices in all the way from Hawaii on one side, all the way to the island of St. Martin on the other, and scattered throughout. And at that time, and it was part of our maturity was really the problem. We weren't really as adept at the relationship side and serving those clients, but we lost every single client that was not in our core geography, and that was because. And they said it wasn't necessarily about the service per se, but I'm sure there was some service there. But they also felt it was the relationship, because we just didn't have maturity in both sides of our business, from the sales and account management as well as the service delivery side, to foster that relationship effectively. And so that was one of our big geographical lessons. So we got very focused on our target geographies and staying within a 45-minute. In fact, our target geography states, we target companies whose headquarters are within a 45-mile radius of our physical offices. So the Twin Cities and Denver. And some of the bad client lessons, I remember the one that always sticks out to me, and I tell this story all the time, and this also gets into lessons about how you write your contracts and how you align your services and all these kind of things, is we had a client that came on board. This was 2015 timeframe, and things were breaking constantly, and it's because they had old infrastructure. It was past its life cycle, it's past its time, and we kept fixing it. And of course, we'd have fire drills. Something would go down, and then we'd scramble to fix it. And we would then go to them, and we did this several times over the course of a year. And we said, look, we can actually solve these problems. Right now, we're just band-aiding them because you're not investing in your infrastructure. You're not investing in the solution that's going to solve the root cause. And so after multiple times of doing that, we finally went to them and said, okay, well, here's the deal. Like, our support program right now is unlimited remote support. And so we are no longer going to take the liability of unlimited remote support when you are choosing to not invest in your infrastructure. So we'll continue to support you, but we're going to do it on a time and materials basis. They called us on breach of contract because they were correct. Our contract did not say anything about their expectation of investing in proper equipment and quality infrastructure that set us up for support. So guess what we wrote into our contract? And by the way, that was a good client to lose, right? A bad client. We were not aligned, not necessarily bad people. I just disagree with how they choose to do business. That's fine.
Right. Yeah.
And so we took that lesson into our current agreement. Is very specific about the expectations that we have of our clients to make sure that we have a good partnership and can realize mutual success together. That was a massive lesson for us.
Yeah, that's good. And Nate, I'm mindful of the whole kind of concept of target client profile is just be deliberate so you can build an engine that delivers to that profile. Like,
Exactly right.
you lose efficiencies when you're serving something outside of like who you should be serving. And you guys took that concept, you built like a target office profile where you wanted to expand your offices to those NFL type cities where you knew you had the right target client profile and plenty of them available to serve, right? So you took it, even kind of expanded that out further and applied it to your locations, right? Your geographies. All right, guys, I'm going to call a bit of an audible. We got a few minutes left. So Steve, I want to come to you for some lessons that you've learned, but let's do part 2 of this, because I think we've got really good things on sort of like why this is important and lessons we've learned. But I think we're going to need more time than we're going to have today to unpack how do you guys approach building your target customer profile and then adjusting it as you kind of grow, because as you grow, it needs to change a bit, especially as you get more revenue. But Steve, what are some of the lessons you've learned around bad clients or geography or not really having this locked in?
Well, look, pulling the plug early, I think, is probably the number one, and being honest with a bad client, because many times a bad client is our own fault. Meaning that, like Nate kind of spoke about it, like set unrealistic expectations or, not having the right stuff in alignment. So sitting down with the client and just saying, look, this isn't good for you. You're not happy with our service. This isn't good for us for these reasons. What do we do to move forward, or do we? So pulling the plug early, I would say part of it, instead of ignoring it or trying to fix the technical problem or like, whatever those kind of things. The second thing, the geography, and I was telling Nate this earlier, but like, if you haven't been up to Duluth, Minnesota, like for me to tell my techs to understand how to deal with Brad's weather would be the most asinine thing. Like they don't understand why they have long poles on the fire hydrants so they can find them in the middle of the winter. They'd be like, why do those exist? Like they have never experienced snow that deep in their life.
Yeah.
But understanding, like you talk about client relationship, well, that's an impact to their business, to their employees, and all these things. And if we can't relate to that, can I really provide great service in a market I don't understand?
Mm-hmm.
Probably not. And so I think that's the challenge. Nate was talking about like 3 foot in snow in Denver this week. He has employees there, and those employees, when they answer the phone, they're not going to be like, "How's the weather?" The weather's shitty, and they know that. So
right. Yeah.
So we just got dumped on with snow with the 2.5 feet of snow. Exactly right.
One of the kind of byproducts of this that we begin to leverage too was when you define who your target client is, you can use that for like a psychological tool when you're going to meet with clients, because I think people like to be a part of something exclusive. And if you can find the right language to say, let's sit down and see if there's a fit for us to work together. Like if you can portray your business then as, we have a premium type service that aligns with the right type of person, and everybody kind of wants to say like, well, what? Yeah, I want that. Like I want like you can really use it to kind of attract and differentiate yourself, even though a lot of what we provide seems like a commodity. It's a way to begin to kind of distinguish yourself maybe from some of your competitors. Are you guys using it that way at all? Like we found we could do it, but Steve, I'll come to you since Nate just answered the last question.
Well, absolutely. And I look at this as like the car experience, right? Like you buy a brand new car to get that complete experience with the warranty, and now they include all the maintenance for that thing and everything else. If I wanted to buy a used car where 30 days later I'm on my own, like they're two different experiences. And so that's one of the things we use to comparison is, look, if you just want to buy hardware, then go buy hardware from Amazon or wherever the heck else you buy it nowadays and move on. But if you want an end-to-end experience to run your with, that's who we are, and we provide it all. And so we lead that way, and we believe that way, and we can prove it that way. And I think that's part of the key. As I said, believe. If you don't think you believe it, then you probably ought not be selling it.
Yeah, and Steve, I'd say, going back to a comment you made earlier, is when you take a client that's not the right fit, and you choose to say, let's part ways with them, as opposed to like hanging on to them in a stranglehold that no one likes, your team, your employees will thank you. Your techs will thank you, right? They appreciate the courage to actually help support them by not keeping a client that is really, really hard and frustrating to deal with, even though you're losing some revenue, right? So that was something I've learned a lesson on in that. Speaking to owners, Brad, she's like, what's the message to owners, right? But the other thing I would say relative to that posturing, that psychological impact, Brad, that you just talked about, is that, if you ask, and I do a sales orientation with every single new team member to our team. I just did one yesterday with 4 or 5 different people that joined our team recently. And I ask them this question: how many of you have ever had a bad experience with a salesperson? It's unanimous, always, every single time, right? Because most of the time, people are expecting salespeople to be aggressive, pushy. They don't listen. They don't ask questions. You know what I mean? They're just like, they presume that they can solve your problem, even though they don't even understand what your problem is because they haven't asked, right? So part of that posture is differentiating yourself from every other sales experience. And I don't just mean MSP sales experience, probably every other sales experience that they typically have in their world, in their life. And so by just basically saying, look, and this is nearly the verbatim, the message that I tell to our prospects if I'm ever in one of those meetings, is like, look, we have a proven IT strategy that we know delivers consistent and reliable results for our clients. It's not the only strategy. I'm not even saying it's the best strategy. It's just we built our entire business around it, and we know that it delivers consistent results for you. Now, and we get a little bit more into the philosophy of that, of how we expect them to invest in their infrastructure. But they say, look, if that philosophically makes sense to you, we could be a great partner for you. We could do great work together. But if that doesn't make sense, and if that's not how you choose to operate your organization, your business, then basically we're going to butt heads every single time we have a conversation. So let's just choose right now to not do that. And that's okay. So we could be a great fit or not, and we just kind of and we're done. And it's very much like, and I'll say this one last thing, and then I know we got to move on to kind of wrap up. Is that if there's a natural interaction, if someone leans forward in a conversation, or even you're standing next to them, the natural thing for people to do oftentimes is like lean back. You're like, whoa, I just like you're getting in my personal space here a little bit. But the flip side also happens. Like if you lean back, oftentimes the natural thing is for the other person to lean forward. And so that posture, instead of the aggressive, assertive, attacking salesperson that makes people like pull back, that posture is you're leaning backwards. Just like, look, we could be a great fit together if this makes sense. If not, that's okay. And you kind of lean back. And that makes people like lean forward and kind of they're like, that's not what I typically hear. I want to learn more about that. I want to see if that makes sense for me. Yeah. So anyway, that's how we approach it, and it's been but you have to believe, like Steve said earlier.
Yeah. All right. I'm gonna move to wrapping this up. But I want to offer one piece of encouragement, because this comes a lot. A question I get a lot, similar to the questions we talked about earlier in the session here today. But if you don't have one, defining your target customer profile and then getting your business onto that profile. It doesn't have to be a jarring thing. It can be as you bring on new customers that fit your target customer profile, then you can raise your prices with the customers that aren't a part of that profile until they self-select out. So there is business, like a lot of people are like, I just don't know how I would get there. There is a way to get there using some of those tools. And what we want to talk about next on our next session would be, like, how do you guys define your target customer profile? How does it fit? How do you kind of qualify your leads and your deals? And like, what does it look like actively kind of in your business?
And how we align our services to it. I think how we align our services to it too, right? It's defining that on one side, and what changes do we make on our service delivery offering in order to put those two together?
Yeah, right. And so I kind of called an audible. I'm hoping Stephanie's okay with that, as she's the one who's marketing these. Hopefully I'm not stepping on what we had promised for next month, but I would say that's what we're going to do. Nate, Steve, any last words? What you're seeing on the screen here is how to go download the growth kit, which is a lot of the tools and wisdom these guys have put together. But any last words on the topic today?
Well, on this topic, it's just extremely valuable, and like it doesn't surprise me that we got to do a part 2, because it's just too much to cover, especially when you're trying to tell stories, because I think stories really give you illustration, because telling stories allows you to hopefully learn the lesson without having to experience the lesson yourself, or at least it's commiserating because you would learn that lesson too. But I would say on the growth kit, one of the things I appreciate is ConnectWise and Brad and Steve and I worked on this, and this is available to you don't have to be logged in. So you do not have to be a ConnectWise partner to access this. So for ConnectWise partners, it's free, but for anybody else, it's free too. And so there's tons of content out there as far as helping you on this journey. And we like to mention that just because we believe that we need to, if we can be part of helping other people, because I know that Steve and I have both been helped by lots of other folks in the industry. And part of doing this and collaborating with ConnectWise is our ability, trying to give back a little bit, because it's saying thank you to the people who helped us, because we're not in a great place to help them. But hopefully this can help you on your journey and some lessons that you can take some lessons learned from us instead of having to do them yourself.
Absolutely. And if you've made it this far in a video, please watch our other videos, because you found value in them, and engage Nate and I on our LinkedIn content. We are constantly producing new stuff.
Yeah, and if you haven't already, smash that subscribe button. Smash it. We're on YouTube. You got to have a little bit of I know you got to have the right profile, and then you got to smash that subscribe button. So I'm thinking I'm hitting some YouTube algorithm right now that's going to elevate our profile as people search on YouTube. But anyway, smash the subscribe button, and you'll get all this great content on a regular basis.
And connect with us for more. Thanks a lot, Brad.
Thank
That's
you.
awesome.
We will talk again next time.